lakes, rumors about the border being changed, and the tariffs. It's a whiplash tariff blitz. One day it's on, another day it's off, but it's already caused the closure of some factories, at least temporary layoffs in Canada.
Hi, welcome to Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. I'm James Heapy, and today I'm joined by Michael Bociurkiw, an author and journalist, also a geopolitical commentator and a fellow at the Atlantic Council. And this is his second visit to Superpowers in just the last 5 or 6 weeks. Michael, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. When we last spoke, the world was moving pretty quickly and nothing has changed since then. So it's necessary to tell viewers that we're recording this at about lunchtime UK time on the 25th of April. And yes, hopefully nothing has changed too drastically before you get to watch this in the week that follows. But Michael, things are moving very quickly, and I wonder if we can start quickly with your reflections on where the Canadian elections look like they are heading, because I think Canadians head to the polls next week.
Correct, and I will be there on the ground in Ottawa as of tomorrow evening to watch up close what happens on Monday. James, the last time we spoke, there was quite a point spread in the public opinion polls between the sworn-in Prime Minister, the incumbent Mr. Carney of the Liberal Party, the ruling Liberal Party, and Pierre Poilievre of the opposition Conservatives. His Majesty is the loyal Conservatives, we must put that in. And that spread because the Liberals, after Mr. Trudeau finally left, resigned, part of that fueled by Mr. Trump's attacks on Canada. That gave the Liberals quite the edge because a lot of Canadians seem to have changed their mind on which leader, which party would be the best to stand up to a very unpredictable, a very transactional Mr. Trump. And then what happened, people started leaning into Mr. Carney. He seemed to have said all the right things. He was, I think, going into this campaign with strong headwinds. There is not only in Canada, I think you would agree, but in several jurisdictions around the world, a kind of backlash against the established elite. This is a central banker who's been head of the Bank of Canada here in the UK as well, and painted as part of the Davos elite. And I think it's fair to say, and I do agree with a lot of this, is that a lot of the tools they've traditionally used to solve these burning problems, whether it's unaffordable housing, broken house systems, creaking infrastructure, they seem to have empty toolboxes when it comes to that. Your poor finance secretary here in the United Kingdom is getting quite the backlash as well. So what has happened in the past few days in Canada, the advanced polls have opened. I have heard there's record numbers of advanced polling, which seems to, it's a good sign, I think you would agree, that there is enthusiasm. It's a people are looking at this as a very existential election because whoever is the next prime minister would probably do a lot better standing up to Mr. Trump with a majority government and as someone who Mr. Trump respects. Now, of course, we can get into that a bit later on. We know someone in Russia that he seems to respect. He seems to, do leaders who appear strong and in a way respectful, but still strong, he seems to like. And I'm not so sure Mr. Carney is the right man for the job on that one. Now, one other quick thing, this happened in the past 24 hours or so. It seems that Mr. Carney has been caught in a word salad of inconsistencies when it comes to a call he had with Mr. Trump not too long ago, and that had to do with the big issue of whether Canada was going to become a 51st state. And Mr. Carney said, well, it didn't really come up at the time, but now it turns out it did. And this isn't the first time when he's been kind of caught off guard. He's also had a very dry style. He's been a little bit arrogant, to put it politely, with journalists, almost lecturing them on, the state of the world, the state of Canada. But at the end of the day, this will be when people actually do go to tick the ballot box. It'll be divided, along who's the strongest one to stand up to Mr. Trump, but also, very importantly, who's strong enough to deal with those key issues again of housing affordability, cost of living crisis. Migration is also a big one, fixing the broken health system, and immigration too, very, very big, because before Mr. Trudeau stepped down, he was going down a path where something like Canada would reach 500,000 new immigrants a year, or migrants a year. Where would they live? How can a broken healthcare system deal with that? This sort of thing. So a lot on the table here, a very, very important election.
It's interesting, whereas the German elections came before, there was plenty that Trump did in his very early days in office.
Yes.
But the full sort of tumult of the tariffs and everything else hadn't been unleashed at that point. So the Canadian elections are the first since we've seen the full extent of Trump's activity. Is there any sense that whereas you could see through sort of Brexit, Johnson, Millet, and others around the world, a hankering for right-of-centre populism that appeared to have radical answers, has Trump now pushed people so far that there's a sort of hankering for a slightly more sensible approach and a more pragmatic approach, or are Canadians still looking for something really different?
I think it's the first one. It's kind of amalgamated Canadians into a sense that, as the two leaders like to use, we need a Team Canada approach. We need to stand together because, it's unbelievable that we're saying this in 2025, but the future existence of the country is at stake. Never before have we had a U.S. president in modern times threaten to take over Canada. And, even if there's no military intervention, anything like that, things are happening in a kind of creeping way. There's talk, for example, of renegotiating our shared water assets, the Great Lakes, rumors about the border being changed. And, the tariffs, it's a whiplash tariff blitz. One day it's on, another day it's off, but it's already caused the closure of some factories, at least temporary layoffs in Canada. It's starting to raise prices because we do import a lot from the United States. The flow of Canadian tourism into Canada, including business trips, have just collapsed. People are feeling very patriotic, but also they don't want to give the Americans money because it's also felt it's not just Mr. Trump. And I would say this too, I agree with him, that where are our American friends? Where are they? Why aren't they standing up for us, screaming, saying this is ridiculous? We love Canadians. We're not hearing much of that. Now, the other thing, James, that's happening is this is a kind of nuance of politics, but we're all nerds, so we'll get into this a tiny bit, is, Canada, of course, is a federation of provinces, but it is a bit fragile at the moment because there's a temptation from wealthy provinces, for example, Ontario, and also Alberta, which is our oil province, to perhaps deviate a bit from Team Canada federal approaches and teach the Americans a good lesson. So, Premier Ford of Ontario was on the verge of cutting off electricity exports to some of the northeastern states, and that would have impacted millions. And then, as you know, at the end of the day, what's the most important to the MAGA base is gas pump prices. I was joking last night. I had a talk not far from here at the National Portrait Gallery. I was saying a lot of the MAGA base loves to drive these big diesel or gas-consuming vehicles, and for even a slight upward movement of gas prices, that would really upset them. So the Premier of Alberta, who is a bit on right-wing side, but has met with Mr. Trump, has said that it is an option on the table that we stop oil exports to the United States. One more thing, going back to Ontario, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario is the biggest purchaser of alcohol in the world. And right away, after Trump's threats came, they said, that's it. No more American booze on the store shelves. And that has hurt producers from Kentucky all the way to California, very, very much. And like a lot of things that are happening right now, James, I think once you have these shifts take place, they're not easy to bring back. People will start looking elsewhere. And I think Canada, I might have said this in our last discussion, might do well to also look at refreshing, if we can use that word, relations with India, which have been hurt quite badly, also with China, diversify our sources of supply and not be so reliant on the United States. So one last thing, James, if I may. Last night I was also asked by a very curious but worried British audience, where do you think this will all end with Trump doing what he's doing, ripping up alliances, including with best friends like Canada? And I said, I think the kind of tipping point will be when those American assembly lines start to close, when the layoffs start to hit, and as I said, when gas prices start to kick in, there could be a very, very big backlash.
Is there an anti-Americanism that is politically potent? Are you seeing politicians, both in their campaigns locally but also nationally, reinforcing anti-American sentiment as a politically potent tool, or has it not quite gone that far?
Oh, most definitely. It's in all of the campaigns using this, again, trying to convince voters that I'm the best one to fight for you. And, what I said, for example, about energy security or energy diversifying our energy sources, but also energy markets. Canada produces a lot of gas as well, and Pierre Poilievre has actually said something quite brilliant, I thought, and that would be to, instead of us being so reliant on north-south energy flows, start to do east-west, so to Asia-Pacific, but to build new LNG terminals on Canada's east coast so that we could export more to Europe, and then in turn that would help Europe lessen their reliance on Russia. And other friends of Mr. Putin. So this is causing, I think, a positive rethink of where we stand in the world as well. Another kind of side issue, this came up last night too, is soft power with the Americans stepping away. For example, I was recently in Thailand around the time that Myanmar earthquake happened, and it was the first major natural disaster with the U.S. simply not there. The three poor chaps from USAID who got sent there hours after they arrived, they got termination notices on their emails, and the Americans promised, I think, a measly $2 million. So I think this is an opportunity for Canada to reestablish itself as a middle power, as a provider of good in the world, because cuts, like happening here in the UK, cuts have happened to foreign aid. And I think it's really, really important to underline, as I did last night, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, James, is that we live in such an interconnected world. We rely so much on each other that, viruses that start, thousands of miles away, it takes nothing for them to cross over, as we saw, of course, with COVID, and to impact our livelihood, our lifestyles, our economies. Similarly, with disasters, whether they're politically motivated, politically sparked, or natural disasters, climate change, these are all triggers for possibly mass migration. So if things happen in certain parts of the world, people have no reason to stay, they move and they look for a better life. And that could really impact our way of life too. But I think a lot of good could come out of this. But the main thing I think for Canadians is it's brought us really closely together, because we have had divides, east, west, English, francophone, and otherwise, and it's a good thing. We've also, for example, looked at beefing up our northern security as well, because we realize the danger is not only from the south anymore, but also from the north as well. And one last thing, if I may, because I think this is a colorful vignette, James, going back to last night, people were astounded to hear this, but I spent most of my adult life in a border town called Sydney, British Columbia. We had a U.S. immigration post right in our town of Sydney. We had twice-a-day ferries to Washington State. I could see the United States from where I lived, and I am at a point, and I never thought I would ever be, whereas I'm actually reluctant. I'm afraid, actually, to go into the United States, because if I do, they're tending to ask for these devices, especially if you're visible, if you're known as a prominent critic of the Trump administration, as I am. So a kind of workaround for that, just so people know, fortunately we have U.S. pre-clearance in places like Dublin and Vancouver and Toronto. So that's the way to test. You try going through that, because if they say no, at least they can't deport you to some Central American prison or detain you. But that's where we are. It boggles the mind, how things have deteriorated to that point.
It is extraordinary, and the contradiction between the lecture that the vice president gave in Paris about European attitudes to freedom of speech versus that sort of activity that you report, which frankly intimidates people that are critics of the regime, of the administration, is really shocking. I wonder when. There's the famous Millwall, who are a football club in the UK for non-British viewers. They have a chant that effectively goes, "No one likes us and we don't care." But I don't think that the American public would ever have that sentiment. And I was listening to some Americans talking on the train back from Brussels the other day, and they got talking to some Dutch people that were sat just across the aisle from them. And I think the Americans were really surprised at how fully the Dutch were following American domestic politics, how those people's view of America and Americans was so shaped by what Trump is doing with his tariffs and his trade policy. And it was just really interesting to hear them realize just how unpopular America is in many places around the world right now. And I wonder if there is a point at which Americans start to be concerned about what the reputation of how damaged the reputation of their country becomes, and then more to your point about the earthquake in Myanmar, America's absence from the world stage, whilst it might sort of suit the MAGA base and sort of Americanize America first and everything else, the reality is that China is the first country to turn up and offer support in America's absence, which seems rather self-defeating if America's grand strategic aim is to win a competition with China. But I don't know. What do you think? Am I getting ahead of myself?
Well, look, Americans are avid travelers, and there's going to be a huge presence of Americans in Europe this year. One reason would be the big jubilee happening in Rome, but also a lot of new flights established because, Americans did like to come to Canada, but now they're switching their travel patterns too. And I think, like the conversation you had, they will find out, they will be in shock to see what the reception might be here. And you do hear anecdotal stories of some establishments saying Americans aren't welcome. I think that could spread very, very easily. But again, I go back to something I said earlier is us as Canadians, I mean, we have the longest undefended border in the world with the Americans. We share so much in common with them. Millions of Canadians own property in the United States, especially in places like Florida and California. And by the way, we're now seeing people like California Governor Newsom say, hey, we're not part of this hate dialogue. Please come to Canada, Canadians. We love you. And I think you're going to see more of that as these the economic pain from Trump's recklessness starts to kick in. But I think I do like to think that Americans do care. But, and I know I tend to say, having said that a lot, but I have to say it. Having said that, I mean, I was in Asia recently, and I had an unwelcome encounter with a MAGA supporter in one of the Asian countries. And he asked me what I do for a living. And I told him, well, I'm on media a lot with prominent individuals like yourself. And so he goes, oh, you're one of those, kind of indicating I'm part of the fake news establishment. And then we started talking about disasters and, the California fires. And he said, I don't know why we're helping them. They didn't help us when we had our own disasters here on the East Coast. And I'm thinking, has it declined to fall into such a point where Americans are questioning why they should even be helping each other, let alone disasters on the other side of the planet? This is a very bad development, and I think it's only stoked by the irresponsible statements, the narrative coming out of the White House day after day after day, very, very divisive. I would encourage everyone to watch the movie Civil War. I'm not saying things are going to go that way, but it is not looking good for the future of the United States when these types of things are happening. And I've said more than once on air and in print that a lot of the actions, a lot of the narratives coming out of this White House are very, very Kremlin-esque, whether it's criticizing the Federal Reserve Chairman, whether it's attacking liberal U.S. universities, whether it's going after journalists like ourselves, calling them fake news, going after established institutions, dissolution of Voice of America, USAID, the U.S. Institute of Peace, ignoring the courts. And then where are the traditional Republicans who subscribe to the values of Reagan and Bush and others? They're not speaking up. And finally, as we know, the Democrats are in a mess. But such divisive narratives and actions, it's very, very depressing, actually.
Yeah. What has amazed me is we're 100 days into such a tumultuous policy agenda, and as yet no one's been fired, no one's resigned. I know that Musk is on his way out, seemingly of his own volition, at the end of his contract. The person who looks a bit, I thought Rubio was going to lose his sense of humor, but then others have told me that Rubio is a true believer and very popular with Trump because he's such a natural communicator of the agenda. Hegseth seems to be moving in towards borrowed time, though.
Yes.
I think that there is amongst that MAGA base, you can wear all the flags you like, but if you appear to be cavalier over national security, that might be a price they're not willing to pay. Do you think he's in trouble?
I think he is, and in any leader, of course, we know this very well from following Southeast Asian politics. If you upset the military, you're in trouble. You may not last, and I think you have a lot of uniformed gentlemen and women who are shocked at what's happening, because at the end of the day, this endangers the lives of the troops on the ground, whether they're on this side of the Atlantic or elsewhere. So you're right, you use the right word there, I think, cavalier attitude, and this has happened twice now. But you have a president who will one day softly condemn these actions, but the next day say he's one of the greatest members of my cabinet. So it's very, very difficult to predict what might happen. But I think what little may remain, the grown-ups in the room, especially those in uniform, may say to Trump, "Hey, this is crossed the line, and we cannot tolerate this." And he definitely can't support. He definitely can't lose support among the military, because I also feel, I spent a lot of time in the United States, is that the MAGA base are very respectful of them. And you don't want to trigger a scenario where you lose their support. So this Trump may have no choice but to send Hegseth back to wherever he came from and appoint someone more responsible.
So I was having dinner with a few members of Congress last week, and they were offering me quite a bipartisan delegation, and they're offering quite an interesting analysis, reminding me that tariffs are actually the preserve of Congress, not the president, and that
Yes.
Congress is currently indulging the president doing this using executive powers, but that if Congress wanted to, they could shut that down. And that then led to a conversation around the circumstances in which Congress would, and the proximity of midterm elections, poll numbers turning in the wrong direction. There was a sense that people seeking re-election wouldn't let the president, through tariff policy, push up prices, reduce the quality of living when an election's coming, and also that, as donors, corporate donors particularly, start to creak, that also has a big impact on American politics too. So I wonder if we are reaching the tipping point, when Fox News is becoming critical, when the poll numbers are turning south, when Congress starts to put the fundraising into motion for their midterm election campaigns, do we start to see a reaction that neuters Trump's activity to a degree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen some U-turns already, or incredible explanations. For example, the other day he was asked in the Oval Office, what do you think about this decline in people coming to the United States? People are afraid to come here. And he blamed it on the foreigners. They said, oh, they're nationalists and they don't like to see us. But I think we're starting to get a little bit of a preview of what might happen in the midterms when members of Congress go back to their home districts, and certain people have released video on social media showing quite the backlash, including among veterans who have either lost benefits or their jobs. And we have had at least one or two, perhaps more incidents where the member of Congress has had to leave and they do that on the pretext, oh, these are troublemakers planted by the Democrats or something like that. But no, I think they're starting to feel the pain, and a lot of their positions may be compromised by sticking too closely to Trump. Now, of course, there's a lot of fear about standing up to Trump because he is so influential and powerful, especially among his base. So it'll probably, James, take a combination of things, but especially I think that tipping point, as I said, would be the economic pain when these assembly lines start to close down, when people are not getting their benefits. If they're seeing, which is very, very widely predicted, a slowdown in government services because of the big indiscriminate cuts. We're already seeing, I was talking to someone last night who used to work for the CIA, shifts, not welcome shifts in the housing markets in places like Washington, D.C., where there are a lot of federal civil servants. So, but, and I think people will quickly, or hopefully quickly, see through Mr. Trump. No, he's not going to be able to get those gleaming smokestacks and brand new factories into the United States, and on factories employing millions and millions of Americans. It's just unsustainable in today's world. And you've probably seen as well Chinese videos poking fun at the Americans of these sweatshops making iPhones and or doing textiles and staffed by Americans. China is having a lot of fun with this as well.
Yeah. I need to whiz you around the world in the time that we've got remaining.
Sure.
You were in Odessa, I think, this week gone.
Yes.
They give us a sense of how Ukrainians are reacting to the tumult of the peace negotiations. What's going on?
Well, I was there over Easter, and that you may recall that was the time of the unilateral ceasefire called by Mr. Putin, which was greeted, of course, with well-deserved cynicism on the Ukrainian side. But it was actually 2 days of calm in Odessa. People were very happy with that. The churches were packed because this was a rare Easter where the two calendars, the Gregorian and Julian calendars, coincided. Absolutely packed churches, churchyards. It was very colorful. Families come out to bless their Easter baskets. But that did not last very long, as we saw. It was followed by that horrific attack on Sumy. We had another one, and then we also things are moving so quickly, I almost forget when they happened. But yeah, in the past 48 hours, the huge attacks on Kiev, and then overnight in eastern Ukraine, there were some deaths and injuries too. And Mr. Putin himself making fun almost of these strikes, admitting that yes, we did strike civilian infrastructure because people were in restaurants, they were drinking vodka, they were having fun. I mean, what a sick mind to be to have to say that. Now, we did see over the past 24 hours as well, Mr. Trump on his social media feed telling Vladimir stop in capital letters, but he's not listening to Mr. Trump. I think Mr. Putin has a kind of two-pronged strategy. On the one hand, try to inflict as much pain as possible on the Ukrainians. By the way, that strike on Kiev, the very, very bad one, it was one of the worst in months, by the way, but it was when Mr. Zelensky was in South Africa, far away from it, and I think that was used to humiliate him. So you do that, you try to humiliate Mr. Zelensky, perhaps chip away at his popularity rating because the war is getting worse. But then you also try to gain as much territory in the east. You try to expel the Ukrainians from that seized territory in Russia. But at the same time, you have another track policy where you try to extract as much concessions from the Americans as possible. Now, the Russians don't have to try hard to extract concessions. It's almost like they're granted to the Russians. And we're talking about everything from the unfreezing of assets to direct flights to the United States, lifting of many sanctions. We're already pretty far down the road in terms of the reestablishment of more full diplomatic presence on both countries. A lot that, again, the Russians don't have to ask for. And Mr. Witkoff, Trump's ally, has, I think, now had his fourth conversation with Mr. Putin. And we don't know much of the details, but it does seem that we are, and a lot of Ukrainians I talk to feel this way, it does seem that we're headed towards, perhaps imminently, an agreement that will be presented to the Ukrainians that has been negotiated between the Trump side and the Russians that will be very tilted towards Russia. The Ukrainians are very, very afraid of that. So basically, we're talking about, we can't say international recognition of Crimea. I think we have to say American recognition of Crimea. We also are probably looking at a proposal that Ukraine drop its NATO bid. We're also looking at, this is a bit of the fuzzy part, but we do know that Mr. Putin would like to have the entire 4 oblasts that they partially control, namely Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. These are especially that last point is something Mr. Zelensky could never sign up to, because that would relegate millions of Ukrainians with a stroke of a pen to living under Russian occupation. So the other thing, the rare earth minerals deal that comes and goes, we're not so sure. But the big one, of course, too, is will the American Trump administration recommit themselves to providing security for the Ukrainians? Because, of course, in any ceasefire deal, you need a security guarantor. And the Russians are well known for violating those things. And will America be there? Ukrainians are not very sure. Finally, on this point, James, I brought this up last night too. It was a very long conversation here in London, but I said that I think I think it's time for the Ukrainians to look for a different middleman. And, one of those might be Mr. Erdogan in Turkey. He has good relations, relatively good relations with Mr. Putin. The Turks have very, very deep ties, of course, in Ukraine, especially economic ones, and the Ukrainians can do business with them. They, after all, negotiated that Black Sea grain initiative deal. The Turks are concerned about Black Sea security. So it may be time to look to them or perhaps one of the Gulf states. But again, none of those countries can provide the security guarantees that the Americans do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analysis. The thing that makes me despair when I hear things like yesterday where the attack goes in, Trump posts on social media,
Yeah,
Vladimir, stop, brilliant. But then the message is, if both sides don't get this deal done, the United States walks away. So there's no jeopardy for Russia to get the deal done, because if the
right.
United States walks away and stops supporting Ukraine, then Russia ends up in a completely ascendant position militarily, and will just achieve its goals in a military way. So I sometimes struggle to see the strategy in what the Trump administration are doing, but then people are quick to tell me that there is none. That Witkoff is pursuing something that is very much in the American
Yeah,
interest rather
yeah.
than seeking to deliver a fair peace.
Yeah, if I may, sorry to interrupt, there is, I can't call it a wild card, but one other option Mr. Zelensky has, but it's a very controversial one, should American security be reduced, and that would be to call for full mobilization. This has been a criticism, I think, that is spreading of the Zelensky administration, not only from the Trump side, but why are so many young, able-bodied men in Michael Bociurkiw's videos? We can see them, lounging on the beach or working out at these outdoor gyms. Why aren't they at the front lines? And it is in a way, a fair criticism because a lot of the men, especially, there are men and women at the front line, but the men especially are of advanced age. They've been there for a long, long time. They're exhausted. They get very, very few breaks, and when they do, they're very short. So there is a renewal. There is a reason, I think, to renew the kind of blood there. But, and some people will say, well, it's turning out to be more a high-tech war, but we're not at that point whatsoever where you can't have human beings on the ground manning the tanks, doing the maintenance and that sort of thing. The other thing here is that we're not quite sure of the stance or the role of China. We do know that they have been allowing the flow, let's put it that way, of dual-use technology, of drones. They look the other way when Chinese nationals sign up to go fight on the Russian side. It's not huge numbers, but still. So I have believed from the start, James, that if Xi Jinping really wanted this war to stop, he could pick up the phone, call Mr. Putin, and Mr. Putin, being the clear junior partner in that relationship, would probably listen to him because China does have a lot of leverage over Russia, especially in the Far East zones. And I think that China, we know, for example, their relationship with the authoritarian regime in Myanmar. They're very, very keen to establish energy security, access to rare earth minerals, a lot of the stuff that Ukraine has as well. And before the war, there was a very robust, growing economic relationship between Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Xi Jinping. Zelensky calling China its best economic partner ever. So we know by now that, of course, China, they have their own thinking, but they also have economic calculations on a lot of the things they do, and for good reason. So that could be a wild card here as well, but let's see.
Michael, we're out of time, but I don't want to let you go before I've asked you about the other region in the world where you've visited recently. You've been in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Trump wants to end conflict in Gaza, whatever the fairness of the deal, just no more killing. End the conflict in Ukraine, whatever the fairness of the deal, no more killing. There speaks isolationist and potentially slightly pacifist president. Would a president like that go to war over Taiwan?
I doubt it. And that's what I hear in Asia as well, is that there's increasing doubt whether the U.S. would stand up to its commitments to Taiwan. Analysts are pointing out that we have not a occupation, but a kind of creeping isolation or quarantine of Taiwan going on with the cutting of submarine cables, with these very provocative military actions. The other day, one of the major newspapers posted a satellite photo of these landing bridges that are sitting in Chinese ports near the Taiwan Straits, ready to be deployed. It does look like they're making the moves for something. If you're a Xi Jinping and you're doing calculations right now, should I move now or shouldn't I would put my money on yes, it probably may be a good time in the near future to move on Taiwan. Because there, again, with the war in Ukraine, when Mr. Putin looks towards Ukraine and other parts of the former Soviet Union, he doesn't see any solid red lines enforced by the United States. And one other thing here I think is important to mention is you mentioned Gaza. And I think one of the big reasons that Mr. Trump is very keen for some kind of deal with Ukraine and Russia is because he's had zero wins overseas. Gaza's a mess. It's getting worse. Ukraine, other parts of the world. So I think he's desperate to show that the master of the art of the deal is still there, and that might fire up his base as well. One more thing, if I can, because we mentioned China there. While I was in Southeast Asia, Xi Jinping was making a very interesting tour of various countries. He was in Cambodia, he was in Malaysia. There's been an upgrade of an agreement between the Cambodians and the Chinese on a very strategic naval base. A lot going on, and a lot of Asian countries saying, oh, hold on, we thought we were friends with the United States, and yet we get slapped with these tariffs. There's something called losing face in a lot of these Asian countries, and that's the feeling right now, is that that's not the way to treat a friend, and if need be, we will look elsewhere, and guess who's there is China. So a lot of what's happening that we've talked about in this great conversation are not things that can be easily reversed. And I mean, I left people in a pretty depressed state last night. I didn't mean it, and I don't plan to do the same thing here. Of course, there are great things going on in the world, lots of innovation in all sorts of fields. You know, the planet has not been ruined entirely by climate change, things like that. Go and enjoy it. But we have to not be silent. I think those of us who subscribe to peace and freedom and democratic values, we have to speak up. And that's why I think my last sentence here would be, when I'm in Canada and I'm looking to my friends south of the border, I do hope they speak up very, very soon, because we're heading to a very precarious part of modern history right now.
Michael, it's fascinating to talk to you, and thank you for coming on to Superpowers again. Please come on again in the future. You're always welcome, even if the message seems pessimistic. The reality is it is simply a very accurate and prescient analysis of geopolitics as they are. And we do live in difficult times, which is why you should make sure you subscribe to Times Radio's YouTube channel, where you can see more Superpowers, but also the other fantastic geopolitical analysis that the channel turns out each week. For now, I'm James Heapy. You've been watching my guest, Michael Bociurkiw. See you next week.